Welcome back to the Sovereign Ratio. Today we're going to do part 2 in our TA 101 series in TradingView and look at basic indicators and what they do. Without going into too much depth, we're going to explore a lot of the options that are commonly used and maybe some that aren't commonly used. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, and leave me a comment below. So in the last video, we explored trend lines and time frames and just a basic overview of TradingView itself. If you remember correctly, we looked at time frames here on the top that we favorited and in the favorites bar. We also looked at some candles. Right next to the candle options, there's an indicator option. Indicators are simply different forms of communication of data to the person looking at the chart that gives them an idea of various things, whether it be volatility, momentum, volume, and a ton of various other things, including astrological moon phases is an indicator, which is very interesting when you see all of these different indicators line up together that produce a certain result. So today we're not going to go into details. We're not going to go into expert level TA on indicators. We're just going to go into basic introduction of indicators, what common ones are, and what some are that I like to use. So the first indicator we have, you probably, if you're new to crypto or you're new to TA, you probably don't even know this is an indicator, but on the bottom here, this is the volume indicator. It's enabled by default in TradingView, and essentially what it shows is the amount of activity in that particular candle. So since we're on the daily time frame, we know that every one of these candles represents 1 day of time, and this represents how much volatility or how much volume or how much trading has occurred within that day. So in this particular instance, the candle's green. That could change at any time and turn to red. But what that suggests is that the day has had a positive price volume. So the volume is indicated by the height of the bar. The price movement is indicated by the color of the bar. So if price is up in comparison to the previous day, the bar is green. But the depth of the bar determines the amount of volume that occurred on that day. So when we see a green bar that's very large, we determine there's been a lot of buying that day. When we see a red bar that's very large, we determine that there's been a lot of selling that day. Now, that could change from green to red in the course of the day, but overall, the color of the bar represents how the day turned out. Or if we go down to a different chart, we go to the 4-hour chart, those bars represent how that 4-hour window turned out. So again, we're zooming in and zooming out on the chart, but the volume indicator is very clear and it's part of TradingView vanilla. We'll put it that way. Vanilla is just what comes out of the package when you open it up and you look at an asset. Now for the fun stuff. Up here on this bar, again, we have the indicator button. We can press that, and there are a lot of indicators in TradingView that a person can utilize. A lot of them are written by TradingView itself. A lot of them are written by the community and people within the community that have developed tools for others to use. You can tell that based off of the fact that there's an author here on the right-hand side with blue text that indicates that a person made it. If it does not have that and it's blank, that indicates that it's a TradingView standard. And that's what we're going to go over right now is TradingView standards. So the easiest and first indicator to put on here is called the stochastic RSI. RSI stands for Relative Strength Index, and the stochastic RSI is essentially a momentum oscillator. When you think about momentum, everything has momentum. A car in motion has momentum, a baseball being thrown has momentum, and there are varying degrees of momentum. What the stochastic oscillator does is give a view of momentum that's a little bit faster. So there are various momentum oscillators. The stochastic happens to be the quicker moving of them, which is a little bit more conducive for in and out trading. But at the same time, the stochastic oscillator can be used for long-term trading, which is how I actually prefer to use it. But in order to find that, you can just go in the search bar here and type stochastic oscillator, actually just stochastic RSI. You can see I've favorited it. If you find one that you like, you can actually favorite it by clicking on the star, and you can see that it does not have an author, so it is a TradingView standard. If we click on that, and now we have the stochastic oscillator directly below the regular chart. Another common indicator, we're going to click on the indicators again, and we're going to type relative strength index. That is another pre-built-in oscillator. It's also a momentum oscillator, but it is a more, I would consider it to be a longer term based off of whatever candle you're looking at, of course. a longer term, slower moving oscillator that I really enjoy using as probably my #1 or #2 indicator. But we can click on that, and now we have the relative strength index. Once we have the indicators that we want, you can actually adjust the size of the indicator. You can see that the cursor changes on the top and the bottom of these indicators to where you can reduce their size or you can increase their size. I personally like my indicators to be smaller because I like to see the chart more. For me, that's about right. It's not exact to what my other charts are, but it's relatively close. Now, just like a lot of other things, in the previous video, we discussed how you can change candle color based off of your preference. You can change the background based off of your preference. Most of these indicators also have changes that can be made. So if we just look at the stochastic oscillator and double click on it, it expands and you can see a full screen view of it. More importantly, if we get right on the line, double click that, you can see that there are other options. You can change the color of the K line, you can change the color of the D line, you can change the thresholds that are set here because you can see there are two different colors. There's black and gray, which are meant to represent different levels of threshold. This threshold being overbought, this threshold being oversold. We'll go into that later, but there are a variety of options that you can change, and the same is true with the RSI. Personally, I'm just going to give a quality of life thing here on the RSI. I don't like that the line is purple. It's hard to see. So what I like to do is change it to white so that it's a lot easier to see, and you can see that change reflected in the graph below. Now, if we click on indicators one more time, I'm actually just going to look at a list of my favorites because I think that's the better way to go for this particular video. You can see that there are several that I have marked here, but some basic ones would include the Bollinger Bands, which is a representation of volatility. I know that sounds a little scary if you're new to TA. Essentially think of volatility as, are people rushing in to buy this? Are people rushing in to sell this? Or is it just kind of hanging out, not really doing a lot, just moving a little bit? Think of volatility like that. The Bollinger Bands is a representation of volatility. Another one here, as I said earlier, is moon phases. I would consider this a very esoteric indicator that you should not put a lot of stock into, but if you combine it with multiple other indicators and formulate a strategy, which I would recommend every single person and every single investor to formulate a strategy that doesn't involve emotion. But if moon phases is part of your strategy and you have a winning success rate, then I don't see why it couldn't work. I personally believe that any indicator is a good indicator as long as the combination, the protocol, and the system that you're using is getting you positive results, which is any trading situation where the success rate is over 50%. If your success rate is 51%, you're winning. Now here's an interesting one right here. This is the silver crossband. I mentioned this because I actually made this indicator. I took a different indicator that had an open license and I modified it a little bit to suit my own needs, but it's also of note if you're good at coding or you understand HTML and you can learn the language of TradingView, you can actually create your own indicators. So I'm going to go ahead and throw my silver crossband on this. I took a couple of moving averages that when they come together, it creates what we call a silver cross. That's a more advanced topic. We're not going to get into it on this video, but you can see this indicator that I made is now live on the chart, as well as what we call the EMA 9, which again is a little bit too complicated for this video, but the EMA 9 is a very powerful moving average that you can add to your chart to gain a little leverage in trading. If for whatever reason you have an indicator that you don't want to see anymore, it's also easy to remove it from the chart. So we have the indicators here. There's a little number with an arrow. We can either collapse that or expand that. If we collapse it, it just gives us the number of indicators that are on the chart at the moment. If we expand it, it goes into more detail. So like the silver crossband, it shows the values that those particular things that I have programmed into that script are looking for. So for instance, the EMA 9 is the green text, and the EMA 9 is currently sitting at 27,671. Now, if I collapse that, that data is no longer available. Also, if I expand that, I have the option to scroll over that indicator. I can hide it temporarily, I can change the settings on it, or I can just remove it completely and it's gone. Same goes with the stochastic oscillator. If I don't want the stochastic oscillator anymore, I can scroll down here and hit X and it's gone. If I don't want the RSI, but I don't want to remove it from the chart completely, I can hit this button that says maximize pane. It gets bigger, I can make it smaller, I can hide it, I can get rid of it. This is collapse pane with the two arrows, and that will just temporarily hide it, and it's now just a bar down here on the bottom that is available if you ever want to expand it again. So that is kind of just a really grassroots way at looking at how to use indicators, how to manage indicators on your chart. Now, as far as the indicators themselves, I'm going to do separate videos. I've already done a few videos on particular indicators before. One of them's called the BBWP, one of them's called the RSI, which we already put on the chart, and another one's called the stochastic RSI, which I've already again put on this chart and since removed it. In this particular video, I'm going to do a very basic view of the relative strength index to just show its functionality. For individual indicators, I would do individual videos on those, probably either later in this TA series or later on an individual basis, because my indicator videos are starting to age a little bit and probably need to be refreshed based off of some updates that have been made in TradingView. Because this RSI that we're looking at now is actually different than the RSI that existed whenever I made the original RSI video. So the relative strength index, as an example, how this can help you in TA. This is TA 101. I think it's important to at least know the RSI. So if we look at the RSI, let's look at times when the RSI is high. Now, at first I want to note that just like you can draw on a regular chart up here in the price area, you can also draw on the chart on indicators. So if we go over here to where we picked trend line, there's a little arrow to the right of that. If we click on that, we can actually choose a ray, an info line, a horizontal ray, a vertical line, and many different other types of lines. For this purpose, because we don't really care where the line starts and ends, we're going to choose a ray and we're going to choose a horizontal ray. Now, if we see here when the RSI topped out or pretty close to topping out, we're going to call it right there. You can see that a line is immediately populated, and it's kind of easy to get a broader view of things that way. So the relative strength index, if we look at times whenever it's touched that green line, one of them is right here, and you can see that the cursor follows both the RSI and it also follows the price. So whenever the RSI topped out down here on the bottom, price had also shot up significantly. Now, price continued to go up while the RSI continued to go down, and that's called a divergence. That's a more advanced topic for the RSI itself. We're not going to go into that today, but generally you can see when the RSI is up, price is up. When the RSI is down, price is down. And that's just a way to gauge momentum in the market and give people a general idea of what's happening to plan trades, plan entries, plan exits. Here's another one back here in January of 23. You can see when the RSI topped out, price had just made a pretty large move from 16K up to around 23K. So in general, when RSI is high, price is moving up. When RSI is low, price is moving down. However, there are a lot of exceptions, a lot of nuances, and a lot of very technical details on that indicator alone that we're not going to explore today. But that is an example of the power of one indicator, let alone combining 5 or 6 indicators that work well for you in determining your trading strategy. Just to add another fun one to this, I'm going to go back up to indicators, and I'm actually going to add the moon phases that we talked about earlier onto this chart. Now, what's interesting about moon phases is this is actual data of the moon itself based off of the time zone that you're in. Now, you might look at this and say, what the hell does this matter at all? But it's a really interesting correlation to see that the moon phases actually do coordinate with lows and highs. So, for example, this is not an indicator that I normally use, but if you look at this when the moon phase is blue, generally price goes down. You got downward movement, down, well, not very much downward movement here, not really here, but a lot of downward movement here. You've got kind of a bottoming here on this white one here, but then you've got upwards movement here, you've got upwards movement here, you've got upwards movement here. Now, to me, when I look at this, I see that on this daily candle chart, the white tends to be a lagging indicator, meaning that the actual movement happens later, but on the blue one, it seems to be an almost immediate movement. Again, this is not an indicator that I normally use, but it's interesting whenever you find the combination of indicators that works well for you. You can really learn to create a trading protocol and a trading setup that allows you to be consistent and act off of facts and act off of data and act off of process rather than acting off of emotion, which the market is already full of enough emotion, and this chart in itself is a representation of emotion. One thing I can say about trading is that when you look at a chart that relates time to price, there is so much emotion involved. I actually look at this as a news and emotional chart. Like, this is not actually a price chart. This is a chart of people's emotions going up and down all over the place, making erratic decisions. The best victory that you can have in crypto, or really any trading market, is to be level-headed, be composed, and fight against the emotions that other people are actually trading on. That is the number one thing about TradingView, is you're not looking at a price, you're looking at emotion. So as I said, Indicators are an extremely important part of anybody's trading protocol, especially when using TradingView. In the future, I will go through and do more detailed evaluations on these indicators and how to use them. But for now, we're doing a very grassroots presentation on how to access them, find them, and add them to your chart. We'll move forward with these indicators in the future and give more detailed ideas on how to use them. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, and leave me a comment below. We'll see you in the next video. Safe trading.